The phone call came at 6:47 a.m. on August 3, 1981, shattering the morning calm at the White House and setting in motion a confrontation that would define Ronald Reagan's presidency forever. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil but right here at home against those who think they can hold America hostage. The president was already awake, sitting at his desk in the family quarters, reading his daily intelligence briefing and sipping his customary cup of coffee. At 70 years old, Reagan had learned to appreciate these quiet morning moments before the chaos of presidential duties began. His silver hair was perfectly combed despite the early hour, and he wore his favorite burgundy robe, a gift from Nancy that had become his morning uniform. "Mr. President," came the urgent voice of Transportation Secretary Drew Lewis over the secure phone line, his voice tight with tension that immediately put Reagan on alert. "They've done it. The air traffic controllers are on strike. Every major airport in America is shutting down as we speak." Ronald Reagan, barely 6 months into his presidency, and still bearing the physical and emotional scars from John Hinckley's assassination attempt just 4 months earlier, felt his jaw tighten as he absorbed the news that would test every principle he'd ever held about leadership, law, and what it truly means to serve your country. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision, his mind already racing through the implications. This wasn't just a labor dispute. This was a direct challenge to the authority of the federal government and the rule of law itself. But this story isn't just about a labor dispute. It's about a moment when one man's unwavering resolve saved America from chaos and taught the world that in a nation of laws, no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. The Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, known as PATCO, had been flexing its muscles for months. Led by Robert Poley, a tough-talking union boss from New York, PATCO represented 13,000 of America's most critical federal employees, the men and women who guided aircraft safely through the nation's skies. These weren't just any workers. Air traffic controllers held the lives of millions in their hands every single day. A mistake, a moment of inattention, and hundreds could die in a fiery crash. They knew this, and more importantly, they knew that America knew it. For months leading up to this moment, Robert Poley had been making increasingly aggressive demands. The stocky union leader from New York wanted a $10,000 across-the-board raise for every controller, nearly doubling many salaries overnight. He demanded a 4-day workweek, unlimited overtime pay, and retirement after just 20 years with full benefits. The total cost: over $700 million annually, money the cash-strapped federal government simply didn't have. When Reagan's negotiators offered a more modest package worth $40 million, Poley sneered at the negotiating team. "Tell your cowboy president that he doesn't understand who he's dealing with. We control America's skies. Without us, this country stops flying. Reagan will give us what we want, or America shuts down." "The president doesn't understand who he's dealing with," Poley told reporters at a tense press conference in July. "We control the skies. Without us, this country comes to a standstill. Reagan will give us what we want, or America stops flying." It was a threat that would have terrified most politicians. But Poley had badly misjudged the man sitting in the Oval Office. Reagan had been preparing for this moment his entire life, though he didn't know it yet. His years as president of the Screen Actors Guild had taught him that sometimes you have to stand up to bullies, even when they hold all the cards. His time as California's governor had shown him that principled leadership sometimes requires making unpopular decisions. And his 6 months as president had already taught him that the world was watching America for any sign of weakness. As Reagan hung up the phone with Secretary Lewis, his mind was already made up. This wasn't just about air traffic controllers or wages or work schedules. This was about whether the United States government could be held hostage by anyone willing to break the law and threaten public safety. Nancy Reagan found her husband in the Oval Office an hour later, staring out at the Rose Garden with the same steely determination she'd seen during his darkest moments as governor. "Ron," she said softly, "Drew Lewis is here with a full briefing. Are you ready for this?" Reagan turned to face his wife, his blue eyes reflecting a resolve that would soon shock the world. "Nancy, these controllers took an oath to serve their country. They signed contracts promising never to strike. Now they think they can break their word and bring America to its knees. Well, they're about to learn that some things are more important than money." The meeting that followed would go down in presidential history as one of the most decisive moments of the Reagan era. Transportation Secretary Lewis spread charts and graphs across the Roosevelt desk, painting a grim picture of American aviation grinding to a halt. "Mr. President, they've shut down everything. LaGuardia, O'Hare, LAX, they're all basically closed. We've got Maybe 25% capacity using supervisors and military controllers, but it's not sustainable. Labor Secretary Raymond Donovan, a former construction executive who understood the union mindset, tried to find middle ground. Sir, maybe we could negotiate, give them part of what they want, save face all around. But Reagan was already shaking his head. Ray, these people broke federal law the moment they walked off the job. They violated their oath of office. If we cave to them now, what message does that send to every other federal employee, to every union in America, to our allies and enemies around the world? He stood up, his 6-foot frame commanding the room despite the weight he'd lost during his recovery. Gentlemen, I've made my decision. The controllers have 48 hours to return to work. If they don't, they're fired. All of them. The room fell silent. Even Reagan's closest advisors were stunned by the finality of his decision. Mr. President, Lewis said carefully, we're talking about 13,000 people. If we fire them all, it could take years to rebuild the system. The economic impact. Drew, Reagan interrupted, his voice calm but unshakable. What's the economic impact of a government that can't enforce its own laws? What's the cost of showing the world that America can be paralyzed by anyone willing to break their promises? But Reagan wasn't finished. He was about to demonstrate a leadership style that would define his presidency and change America forever. That afternoon, Reagan called a press conference in the Rose Garden. As reporters gathered under the sweltering August sun, White House staff noticed something different about the president's demeanor. Gone was the affable Hollywood charm. In its place stood a leader who meant business. Ladies and gentlemen, Reagan began, his voice carrying the authority of the world's most powerful office. This morning at 7 a.m., the union representing those who man America's air traffic control facilities called a strike. This was the culmination of 7 months of negotiations between the Federal Aviation Administration and the union. He paused, looking directly into the television cameras that would carry his words to millions of anxious Americans. In doing this, the union has violated the law, and this government will not condone illegal actions by government employees. The controllers who are striking have forfeited their jobs and will be fired. The assembled reporters gasped. No president in modern history had fired an entire union of federal workers. But Reagan wasn't done delivering his ultimatum that would echo around the world. Those who do not report for work this morning are in violation of the law, and if they do not report for work within 48 hours, they have forfeited their jobs and will be terminated. The impact was immediate and electric. Stock markets, which had been plummeting on fears of economic chaos, suddenly reversed course. America's allies, who had been watching nervously for signs of weak leadership, breathed sighs of relief. And America's enemies, who had hoped to see the new president buckle under pressure, suddenly realized they were dealing with someone entirely different than they'd expected. Back at Patco headquarters in Washington, Robert Pauley was in full damage control mode, desperately trying to save face with his membership while scrambling to find a way out of the corner he'd painted himself into. He's bluffing, Pauley told a room full of nervous controllers that evening. Reagan can't fire 13,000 people. The airlines won't let him. The public won't stand for it. He'll cave within a week. But Pauley had badly underestimated both Ronald Reagan's resolve and the American people's respect for law and order. As the 48-hour deadline approached, something remarkable happened across America. Instead of supporting the striking controllers, ordinary working families began rallying behind their president. Letters and phone calls poured into the White House expressing overwhelming support for Reagan's tough stance. Margaret Thompson, a secretary from Cleveland whose husband worked as a police officer, wrote, "Dear Mr. President, my husband risks his life daily to uphold the law. Thank you for showing that the law applies to everyone equally, even federal employees who think they're above the rules." James Morrison, a Vietnam veteran from Phoenix, called the White House, "Mr. President, I took an oath to defend this country, and kept it even in Vietnam. These controllers took an oath too, and they broke it. Good for you for holding them accountable." These weren't isolated voices. Across America, working families who played by the rules, honored their commitments, and respected the law were watching their president do exactly what they expected their leaders to do, lead with principle, not politics. As the deadline expired on August 5th, only 1,300 controllers had returned to work. Reagan faced the moment that would define his entire presidency. "Fire them," he told Secretary Lewis with the same calm authority he'd shown throughout the crisis. "All of them." And with those 3 words, Reagan sent shockwaves around the world that are still being felt today. The immediate aftermath was chaos, just as the union had predicted. Flights were canceled, travelers stranded, and the aviation industry thrown into turmoil. But Reagan had prepared for this moment, mobilizing military controllers, fast-tracking training for replacements, and implementing emergency procedures to keep essential flights operating. More importantly, he used the crisis to explain to the American people what leadership really means. "This is not about being anti-union," Reagan said during a follow-up press conference. "I was a union president myself for 6 years. This is about the rule of law and the principle that no one, no individual, no group, no union can hold the American people hostage." The international reaction was swift and profound. Margaret Thatcher, Britain's Iron Lady, called Reagan personally to congratulate him on his resolve. "Mr. President," she said, "you've shown the world what real leadership looks like." But perhaps the most significant reaction came from Moscow. Soviet leaders, who had been testing Reagan's resolve since his inauguration, suddenly realized they were dealing with an American president who meant what he said. The Patco strike became a turning point in the Cold War, demonstrating that Reagan wouldn't back down from confrontation when America's interests were at stake. The rebuilding of America's air traffic control system took years, but it was accomplished with remarkable efficiency and innovation. New technology was implemented, training programs modernized, and safety standards actually improved. By 1984, the aviation system was running more smoothly than ever before. But the real impact wasn't on aviation. It was on American leadership and respect for law. Reagan's handling of the Patco strike sent a clear message that laws matter, oaths have meaning, and leadership requires courage. It showed that in America, no group is so powerful that it can ignore the law and hold the country hostage to its demands. The lesson resonated far beyond labor relations. When Reagan later faced down Soviet aggression, negotiated arms control agreements, and ultimately helped end the Cold War, world leaders remembered the president who fired 13,000 federal employees rather than bow to illegal pressure. Years later, when asked about the decision, Reagan was characteristically modest. "I didn't fire those controllers to be tough," he said. "I fired them because they broke the law, and in America that has to mean something." But Reagan's decision had consequences that extended far beyond a single labor dispute. It established him as a leader who meant what he said, who would enforce the law regardless of political pressure, and who understood that true strength comes from principled action, not popular compromise. The Patco strike taught America and the world that Ronald Reagan was exactly what he appeared to be: a leader who believed in the rule of law, who kept his word, and who understood that sometimes doing the right thing requires courage, even when it's difficult. Today, when politicians routinely break promises and bend rules for political advantage, Reagan's handling of the air traffic controllers' strike stands as a reminder of what principled leadership looks like. It shows that in a nation of laws, those laws must apply to everyone equally: federal employees and private citizens, union members and corporate executives, powerful interests and ordinary Americans. The phone call that woke Reagan on August 3, 1981, was meant to present him with an impossible choice: cave to illegal demands or face economic chaos. Instead, it gave him the opportunity to show America and the world what real leadership looks like when the stakes are highest and the pressure is greatest.